All right, guys, welcome to another episode of the Leads to Deals podcast, where we're going to talk about everything from leads to deals and everything that we talk about leads to deals. I'm honored to have here on today's episode somebody I consider to be a true tactician of the industry. I think I've never been more impressed by somebody who can deliver clearly, almost like a doctor would, an authoritative voice for sales. He's somebody, when I got into his industry, one of the initial people that I looked up to, and I have just a tremendous amount of respect for. And I continually learn from him on how to better communicate the sales concepts that I know that he seems to be able to convey even better. So I would like to give it up and welcome Steve Trang to the Leads to Deals podcast. Brother, thank you for coming on today.
Oh man, thank you for having me. I love everything you do. So anything I can do to be part of what you're doing, it's really my honor.
Dude, the feeling's mutual. I started to kind of really study you before today's podcast. I wanted to know more about the guy, and I learned so much, but only on paper, right? I've seen where you're at today, but I didn't hear much of the journey. And I want to kind of ask you a pointed question out of the gates, if I may. You know, I read the immigrant story that you're originally, I believe, born in Italy, and then that your family migrated here to the States. What disadvantages do you think you had as an immigrant that you were able to flip on its head and turn into an advantage that's got you to the success level that you're at today?
Man, I don't think I had any disadvantages.
Nice.
I think it's only been advantage. It's been all upside. I didn't speak a word of English until I was 4 years old. And like many immigrants, I learned English from Sesame Street, And that's a real thing. I didn't know it was a real thing until I saw something on Facebook about it. But like most immigrants around that time, around my age at least, learn English from Sesame Street, right?
Wow.
And so, but I think being an immigrant just gives you that chip on your shoulder, right? Like my parents sacrificed or risked their lives to come here. I better freaking do something with it. So I think it's giving me an advantage. I don't think it's been any disadvantages. It's been it's not been an obstacle in any way whatsoever.
You know, when I hear somebody say that, Steve, though, I think that, that's a mindset that's also either given to you or innate by birth, because you can't see any obstacle in your way other than a way. And it's and every disadvantage is the seed of an advantage. And so while I'm sure there's probably somebody else in this world who could have had an outcome or responded differently and would have had a litany of disadvantages that they saw, for you, everything you were able to flip, and then it was your advantage.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure my parents saw disadvantages, right? Like, I remember my parents complaining about racism in the workforce, right? Because, we came here in 1980. So, I remember hearing them complain about it. And so I knew when I go to work, I'm going to get better at office politics because my parents suck at it, right? And it wasn't like they suck at office politics. Like, their English isn't great, And so... were they dealing with racism? I'm sure there were elements of racism, right? I have no doubt about that. But I took that and put in my head, I will not be a victim to that. And I'm going to crush it in office politics. And I absolutely did. When I worked at Intel, I was great at letting everyone know how awesome my work was at all times. Everyone knew what I was working on, and there was no question on what Steve was working on at all times.
I see a lot of kids. I'm here in Latin America for people who are maybe just catching this. And so I'm getting used to this other culture. And one of the things that I have to help people understand is sometimes being loud isn't being obnoxious. And there is some truth to the saying about the squeaky wheel gets the oil. And, it's very easy to put your head down and say, yes, my work product will speak for itself, which is true. That's the true substance of it all. But there's also the other side of making sure you are that good communicator and that you can present what you're doing and not get caught in this sea of other noise out there. So it sounds like that even before you became a public speaker, you had the seeds of, I'm going to communicate my way to success even before you used it as a tool.
Right. I mean, at Intel, we had these things, right? We call them focals and we call them 360s, right? And you had to share what you worked on for the quarter, right? Because that's how you figured out whether you got a raise or not. So, hang on a second here.
Yep.
So whether you're going to get a raise or not, right? And so promotions and this and that. And so like, I was pretty lazy at Intel. Like I was working like 20, 25, 30 hours a week, you know? But when it came to review time, I was working hard because I was compiling, here is every single thing I accomplished for the company in the last 90 days. We're not going to forget what Steve contributed to the company, right? While everyone else was just living their lives like, yeah, you know, here's what I did. But like no one, they worked just as hard. They worked harder for the company than they did for themselves. Whereas for myself, I was working hard for the company. I wasn't working hard, but I was producing for the company.
Yeah.
But I was marketing Steve at Intel.
Were you that person in high school and college as well too? Were you
No,
because you have this like very unique extrovert introvert like personality. Like if I saw you just walk by you, I would walk by you. But once you communicate, I'm captivated. And so it's like, and you seem so comfortable. And I don't know if you truly are, or if this is like you forced yourself, but were you that type of, like, did you know in high school and then maybe even college, like, you know what? I have the power to kind of command a presence.
Yeah. So I think sports kind of played a lot in that, you know, as far as how aware I was. I know in high school, right, I was a nerd, you know, got the good grades, all the gifted programs and so on. But I also knew the athletes, the smokers, the acting kids. So I knew everybody. I didn't necessarily hang out with them, but I knew them and they knew me. That wasn't by design, just kind of what my personality was. I also remember vividly, like all my friends, they were always like crying, you know, when like the girl they liked didn't like them back, or like, you know, this whole dealing with rejection. And I never cared, you know, like I never cared what anyone thought. I actually had a deal. I remember, not a deal, but a situation in Vegas. This is, I mean, I think we were all working at this point. And like all my buddies always laugh, like, Steve, you have no fear whatsoever. It's like, what do you mean? It's like, we go to the club, you walk right up to the hottest girl. Like, you don't talk to the other girls. You just go straight to the hottest girl and you just start talking to her and you're comfortable. Like, what is this? It's like, I don't know. Like, what's the worst that can happen? She's going to say no. So like, I've never cared what people thought, and I'm going to put myself out there.
Yeah, but that's like Big Brother vibes, like typically teaches you that. But you're the big brother, if I remember, like you're the oldest of the kids. So
oldest
like
of 6 boys.
Yeah. So first off, wow, right? You're setting the bar high to roll out there. But that's normally something like I could see my older brother giving me advice for, like, hey man, listen, don't worry about it. When it all settles down in a year from now, you're not going to remember any of these no's, but innately you sound like you had it even at that age. Was Intel where you intended to be? Like, was that your goal? Was Intel. Like, hey, I want that type of job?
Yes, engineering, yes, but not Intel. Intel was the only company that was hiring, right? Because I graduated college in 2002, right? And this is right after the 9/11 and the dot-com bust. So nobody was hiring. So I went to graduate school to get my PhD, but I dropped out with a master's degree. And I went to go work for Intel because Intel was literally the only company that was hiring in 2003. So that's where I worked.
All right. And then how does Steve Trang go, all right, cool, I'm Intel, I'm in the corporate world, and then finally put yourself in a position where you're using that art of communication or that self-confidence in more of a sales type environment? For those guys out there that are in this blue collar and they see their friends or these people because this is what blew my mind from meeting friends from high school. It's like, a lot of times the blue collar guys were making more money than the guys who went to college. They were able to go faster into the workforce, right? So they had a 4-year advantage. But I knew guys who were in sales, different sales, who were making significantly more than everybody else in student loan debt, et cetera, et cetera. So for those people who are in that blue collar thing, like, what was your transition? How did you finally get out of Intel? Or did they kick you out, Steve? Let's be honest.
Well, I kept waiting. I kept waiting for them to let me go because Intel was notorious in this time for letting people go. But they wouldn't let me go. No matter, I even asked my boss to let me go one time. He's like, no, because I wanted a 2-month severance. Anyway, so I read Rich Dad Poor Dad, right? Like a lot of people around our age group, that was what got me. Not Instagram, like that got like the last 5 years. But like prior to that, it was Rich Dad Poor Dad. So I read the book. I started buying properties with my friends, and along the way, I meet a real estate broker. And I'm looking at this guy. It's like, this guy just kind of hangs out all day. It's like, what do you do exactly? It's like, I just talk to people. It's like, okay, how much do you make doing that? It's like, 6 figures easily. It's like, wait a minute. I have a master's degree. I'm making $85,000 a year, right? Like, this is a freaking joke. You just hang around and talk to people. You make six figures. Like, yeah, it's like, I want to do that. Like, what do I have to do to learn from you? He's like, go get your real estate license. I'll teach you everything I know. 2.5 weeks, I get my real estate license, submit my 2 weeks notice. I'm a realtor in May of 2007. Not the best time.
Yeah. No. And you were the realtor in what state?
Arizona, which is catastrophic.
Oh, I thought you did the influencer move to Arizona. I didn't know you were originally from Arizona, or that's where you kind of laid your original foundation.
Yeah.
Wow. And Arizona, out of all the states to be in, it was at the top of the worst list.
Yes, it was.
Wow. Dude, that's so Jordan Belfortish, Steve. Like, it's different, but it's so Belfortish because, you know, like, he obviously went his way, got in the crash the day that the market stopped there. And he had that innate sales skills and ability, and he flipped it, and all of a sudden everything crashed. And so were you married then when you started 2007?
I got married after I quit, right? My poor wife. So, like, she was marrying an engineer who became a realtor.
Oh, and engineers, there's a lot of engineer jokes. Like, and when you're in sales, one of the people that you hate to talk to are engineers because they're so analytical. Like, we used to have these people come in on sales presentations and they'd have to fill out their occupation. And when you saw engineer, you're like, oh, here we go. Put on our big pants. This is going to be dry. We're going to have to really go into the weeds, et cetera, et cetera.
Not just dry, but a long meeting.
Yes. Yeah. Very logical, and sales is also very emotional. And so it's a balance. So would you consider being a realtor the first time you started to have like a sales job? But did you even consider it sales based on your definition of sales now?
So the way I came out, my mindset is I'm not going to be a sleazy salesperson, right? Which is the wrong mindset. But that was the mindset I had. I'm not going to be another sleazeball, right? Like, I'm going to be like totally transparent and like logical and just give you all the information that you need, right? Because that's how I want to buy, right? Because I do have 100%. An engineering mindset, right? But unfortunately, that's what everyone wants, but what nobody needs. And so what people need is like as little information as possible that you need to make the decision, and have you sell yourself on the vision and the dream, right? Like, that's what really the sales process. But before that, one of my first jobs out of high school was I actually did work at a cold call center. So I was selling credit cards, children's books, magazine subscriptions. So I did have some sales experience, not a lot, but some.
How long did you do that job?
I think it was for a summer.
Bro, I'll tell you,
it was brutal. Cold calling.
Before, this was like when I was like 19, 20, and it wasn't even cold calling. It was just some scumbag. I was between jobs, and it was some terrible call center that answered inbound calls for some like really like scammy infomercial type. I can't even remember what it was, but I just remember the day that it was Christmas Day and they were open on Christmas Day. You had to take calls on Christmas Day. And I had never missed a Christmas with my family my entire life, but now I'm a big boy and I got to pay my own bills and I'm not going to ask for help. And I remember there that morning, I said, okay, this I'll never do like again. Like I'm done. And then ultimately I found a real sales profession, but there's a lot of really bad call centers out there and really bad campaigns. And so what I try to design here is something that feels like Google-esque, and it's got, you know, like you can be a better boss when you've had crappy bosses. So like I feel the pain of some of these cold call campaigns that are out there, particularly with the caliber of people that they attract. It can be tough.
I mean, the worst part for me, I think, is the ugly blue cubicles with the smoke smell. I think that was probably the worst part of it.
Yeah, that'll get you. That now you're showing your age, what they had smoke smell cubicles. So real talk, man, 2007, you're getting your feet into this industry. Things are crashing. How are you doing financially? Like, are you under extreme stress?
I got destroyed. Extreme stress. I mean, really the stress I was okay with, right? It was really more my wife, right? Like,
of course.
That was where it really sucked, because like your job as a man is to take care of your wife, right?
Yeah,
and in 2008, my expenses exceeded my revenue by $50K. So on my 1040, I'm reporting negative $50,000 to the IRS. Like the pity my accountant gave me when I filed my taxes, he still outcharged me, right, for the services. But the pity he gave me, right, like that was probably one of the if not the most humbling, definitely one of the most humbling experiences in my sales journey.
Yeah. And you didn't give up though. So were
Hell no.
you just crazy? Like, were you getting pressure
Oh,
from
lots of
family and
pressure.
friends to go
Lots
back
of
to something
pressure.
more corporate?
Yes. Lots of pressure from the wife, right? Which is understandable because she wants safety and security. So I actually went back to Intel because they told me when I quit, you can come back anytime, right? I
Nice.
didn't burn any bridges. You can come back anytime. So I went back in 2009-ish. And they're like, yeah, we'd love to have you back, but we have a hiring freeze. So no. I was like, and thank God, right? Because it was at this point where now I had no options, no choices. The boats are burned. I have to figure this out.
Amen.
So thank God.
You know, I was reading your journey and you were talking about Zig Ziglar, who is by far the most impactful person that I've ever seen in my life outside of my own father on my own. Like you could say Jesus, you could say my other family members that have passed away, but like people that before I met him, but people that I've actually seen in person or even somebody outside of my immediate family. Zig Ziglar changed my life above and beyond. And the same quote that I saw inspired you is one that's done so many wonders for my life, which is you can have everything you want out of life if you can help enough people get what they want out of life.
Absolutely.
And I looked at it as just math, Steve, like, okay, well, this is a fact. I know it's a fact. It feels like a fact. I know it's a fact. So I want this much and I can have all of this. All I got to do is just help. Like, okay, boom, done. I'm going to pay it forward and do these types of things. So how did you first like find, because that shows our age, right? You know, it's not like Andy Elliott, but we're talking about, you know, Zig Ziglar. But how did you come across those types of influencers? Do you remember how you were introduced to those sales kind of teachers?
So up until 2007, right, when I was 27 years old, up until then, I was pretty uncoachable, right? Because like I already went to school, I already got my degree. I don't need any more information, right? They tried to get me to read more books at Intel. I was like, I'm good. you know, not the model employee. But once I got into sales for myself, I gobbled up everything, right? Like everyone reads, you know, Dale Carnegie, How to Win Friends and Influence People, 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, the Think and Grow Rich, and then a bunch of Zig Ziglar stuff. So like I just gobbled everything up, right? Like, I mean, that's when I stopped listening to music, right? I got CDs when CDs was still a thing, right? I would go to, I think probably like LimeWire or whatever and just download all these MP3s, put them on a CD and just listen in my car.
Yeah. Automobile University was a real thing. And I think I'm a little bit older than you. How old are you, Steve?
20. Well, I'm 40, turning 45 next month.
Okay. So we're in the same age then. I think we may have found it at different eras, but still but for me, it was Zig Ziglar, John Maxwell, Tony Robbins, Tom Hopkins. And those guys were so powerful for my sales career because I knew what they were saying was truthful. And then I could take those books and I could put them into action. What I think is an advantage that I have or we had in our era is it wasn't this insane amount of information that it was available. There was like really key posts. And I try to tell my kids here today is like, if you guys can, your number one discipline can be phone discipline. And you can revert to books versus always using your phones to try to, you know, source your data and get lost, because what happens is they'll see a YouTube video of somebody and then now they're listening to in the background while they're on IG and they're not able to do it. So like for you as an educator, which we'll go into some of that here in a second, how are you dealing with that shift in technology? Because it would have been easier for me to find you and to get attached to you 20 years ago than it would be to stay attached to you now, because there's so much noise in the marketplace. So do you kind of feel similar about the noise in the marketplace?
Oh, absolutely. I am working way harder to stay relevant today. Right. And so like, you know, one of the things I actually hired a marketing consultant and he's helped me actually dial in my message as well. So like, you know, people used to ask me like, why should I go with you? It's like, you know, we work with the best, you know, we have all the top clients, the best buyers, this and that, blah, blah, blah. Right. Now they're like, well, what makes you different? It's like, well, you know, A, people pay us so that they can close more sales. And then B, we don't sell people. We get people that sell themselves. Right. So that's concise how we're different than everybody else. So yeah, but it's a lot harder to cut through the noise, right? Everybody with an iPhone is an influencer today.
Yeah, they are. And we'll talk about that here in a second, because I think you've seen more than the average Joe, because you're in the mecca of at least your guys' vertical right now, the REI space. But I
Yeah.
wanted to hit on something that else that, I inspired me about you and helped reaffirm some of my own belief processes. But I understand that you're big, or have been big, on like morning affirmations
Mhm.
and kind of having like that morning routine. Can you walk us through particularly what those affirmations and your schedule was when you were just starting out, and that hardest of hard times before you
Mhm.
actually had the revenue to support the plan? Because
Mhm.
before you were just mapping it out, and then the money came later. So
Right.
walk me through what your affirmations were
So
like and how it
I
was.
wasn't so good during the struggles because I was doing a bunch of REO stuff, right? Listing properties for banks. And I wasn't a solo operator, but it felt like a solo operator. So like I could only do like the bank property opinions or the broker price opinions, all the BPOs, all the
Yes.
reporting, submitting everything to the bank. I can only submit that during the off hours. So I would typically work until about 2 o'clock in the morning, right? So like during the
Wow.
day, I'm talking to buyers, I'm talking to sellers, I'm talking to other realtors. And then once that's done, now I get to work on all the reporting stuff for the bank. So again, it was not unusual for me to go to bed at 2 o'clock in the morning and then waking up at like 7:30, 8:30, 9 o'clock some days, and then starting all over. So I didn't have a morning routine until much, much later. It wasn't until I read The Miracle Morning, which is one of the most
Mm,
impactful books. But if I'm being completely honest, my morning routine's pretty atrocious this week, or at this point in my career. Like
yeah.
I wake up at 4:45, 5 days a week, but on Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays, it's just to play basketball.
Hey, that's your
right?
form of meditation. That's
That's my
your
meditation.
form. Yes.
Yeah, right. And then Tuesdays and Thursdays, I'm just catching up because right now we're at a point where I'm still dealing with a lot of the marketing within our organization. So
Yeah.
that's the time I used to dedicate towards marketing. But in the past, right, like the affirmations,
Sure.
I like I talk about I'm a juggernaut, I'm unstoppable. Remembering what's important. I want my wife to feel cherished at all
Yes.
times. I want my kids to be fulfilled
Yes.
and well grounded. Right. I don't put like rich or successful or happy.
Exactly.
I don't care about any of that. Right. If they're fulfilled, everything else takes care of itself. So
Yeah.
those are the things that are important to me. So those things I've written down. I want to be able to retire my parents in such a way where I'm paying them $10,000 a month. That's just their salary, just to be my parents. We're not there yet.
Yes.
Right. But those are the things I have on there, and I would read it. But if I'm being completely honest, my morning routines is playing basketball, listening to audiobooks to and from the gym, and
Yes.
then working on my business because I'm at a season right now where I'm the chief marketing officer inside our company.
Yeah. Dude, I hear it. And sometimes too, though, we need a little kick. I'm a big person. What I'm so thankful about technology today, Steve Trang, though, is the motivational videos. And like you said earlier, like you ditched all your music and, for that certain season or phase. And then,
Still
but I
in that
love just
season.
going in there. I still go in there and like David Goggins or
Mhm.
I Can't Be Knocked Down type things. And I just love them. And when we start our day here at the office, when the whole team's coming in, there's always that type of motivation in the background, because as much as I can preach to them, I know that they're not pre-programming their brains the way I want them to. So I at least want them to come in here and hear it. And so for those guys and
Yeah.
gals that are out there, you really have to, as you age, you'll marvel at the power of the subconscious mind and what you can do to mentally program yourself for success. And I think that the more deeper into the pool you go, like what's your worst case scenario if you listen to binaural mental programming at night that's saying something whispering low in your ear? What's the worst that can happen? You listen to something beautiful, you went to bed and somebody told you, I am successful, I am worthy, I'm thousands and thousands of times. It matters. And that's what I got from some of my original mentors was just
Man,
that power.
I will tell you, subconscious, I thought was some woo-woo, foo-foo
Mm-hmm.
nonsense forever. Man, the last year, it's huge. Not only is it huge for myself, but I'm actually applying it to team members to get more success out of them. Because I used to be like, hey, if you don't have the work ethic, like get the hell out of here. Now
Yep.
it's like, hey, like maybe we could figure out why you don't have the work ethic, right? Let's dive into the subconscious. Let's dive into maybe what things were like growing up, right? You're playing therapist, and I'm not saying I do this all the time.
Yep.
but there are applications of it where I can help someone that's going through a tough patch.
And sometimes, man, one of the things I've had to learn as a CEO is not to get frustrated, but to have a strategy for when I believe in somebody more than they believe in themselves. Mm-hmm. Because I was them before. I was a degenerate. I was an idiot. I talked before I thought. I overstepped my boundaries. I called my boss drunk one time and let him have it. Like I did. If I had not had the most amazing one particular guy I worked for like 11 years, he saw something in me so much greater than the immediate person that I was in front of him, that he put up with a lot of stuff and didn't let me, do wrong. But he understood my immaturity didn't match my potentiality. And so I try to deal with that a lot because I have a much younger avatar here. My average kid here works here is in their, low 20s and I'm in my 40s. And so there's a gap, but I just remember being an idiot. So I try to let him, I try to let him pass. Talking about people who are not idiots. I saw that in your mentor list, you talked about two people that I absolutely love in this industry that I've met, and I put them on a pedestal similar to you. And that is Gary Harper and Eric Brewer. Mm-hmm. Those people have made a huge impact on my life. And so in this industry, can you share with me a little bit about what they've done to give you some insights or movement? Because I saw them on your mentor list.
Yeah. So Gary Harper, I mean, the guy has seen the inside of multiple great businesses. And so I think where I've said this before, and it might sound cocky, I hope it doesn't come across that way. I felt like I didn't need Gary because I've read the books, right? I've read EOS, I've read Traction, I've read all these other business books, right? And then at one point I was like, you know what? Gary's a friend. I'm going to have him come in and help me with my business. And here's what I figured out. I have massive blind spots. There are stupid things I'm doing all day, every day that no one's calling me out on my BS, right? So Gary comes in and it's like, hey, dummy. He doesn't use those words, but it's how it felt. You're doing this and this and this and this, and this is harming your company, right? Yeah. So that's where Gary has been absolutely instrumental. He can very quickly, kind of like for me, if I'm buying a house, they open the front door. I have an idea what it's going to cost to rehab it. Just from them opening the door, the smell, right? I can just, I just know before I step foot in the house, how much it's going to cost about approximately in repairs. Right? Gary can walk into a business and just see how people are interacting, have an idea what the problems are in the business. And then Eric Brewer, I consider him a dear friend. When I went through some personnel challenges, he was great to bounce ideas off of, particularly help me understand how this is my fault, right? What have I done to cause this to happen? So he's great in calling you also on your BS. You don't have to ask him; he'll volunteer it, right? But yeah, great.
He's not sugarcoated. He told me he stopped cussing like a year ago, and so I didn't get to meet him before when he was a little bit more raw. But I've heard stories that he was a little bit more unfiltered. But he's a super authentic guy. He's somebody that I look up to, and I think that's what the industry. I've only been in your guys' space since about 4 years ago now. And so when I came in, I was like, oh, everybody's authentic. And then really quickly, like I started to see through it. And then I only saw a couple of bright lights. And so for you who elected to go from real estate, realtor, investing back and forth, wherever you were, when did the light bulb go into like, okay, I'm going to now convey my expertise as now like a sales professional, and I'm going to help people. Was it one of these mentors that helped get you to that stage, or how does Steve Trang become closemoresales.com and real estate disruptors, this now like force in the REI world?
So first you have to understand, I was actually pretty bad at sales because even though I had a lot of confidence, I had a lot of irrational confidence, unjustified confidence. I didn't really learn sales until I got into real estate and I read all those books, right? Go for no, question behind the question-based selling, like all these books, never split the difference. And I learned them and I applied them, right? But there was a magical moment in 2018 where it all clicked. That's what really was, right? So it just clicked. And once it just clicked, then I have Maxwell on my podcast at the end of 18. He's like, hey, I'm doing an event at We Live 19. We like to speak. We're gonna have over 1,000 people there. I was like, hell yeah! Like, where do I sign up? So I go and I prepare a presentation based off our sales process. So on stage in front of 1,000 people in March of 2019, and I was like, in my mind, like, this is gonna be killer. No one's ever heard of this before. We're gonna crush it, right? Lo and behold, John Martinez had been doing it for a while, so there are people that had heard of it, right? But for a majority of the audience, they'd never heard of it. And so I had, after that, for months, people tagging me on Instagram. Hey, I used this line that Steve said at We Live, and I got this result. So I had that. I had people texting me, DMing me, like, hey, I'm having more success with this. Will you coach me? And I also saw, which is the other side of social media, people regurgitating the stuff I said and then calling it their own. That's just the way it is. That's just the way the world works, right? I was like, okay, well, at least, the message is out there. But as I had more and more people asking me for this, like, well, let's throw an event. We'll do our own event. So May of 19 is when I actually had my first event, and we knocked out of the park. I had 28 people come to the very, very first one. Another thing that happened a lot too that I don't speak as much about is that we had, when COVID occurred, we had closed Olympics. We had, Elijah Rubin, Alex Sainz, Aaron Bevins, right? So we had closed Olympics, and I was not on the original 12, but there was like another guru who bowed out because he's like, if I bomb on closed Olympics, it's going to hurt my business. And so they reached out to me and like, hey, Steve, we had someone bow out. Would you want to be the guy? Because you have a sales training program. I was like, hell yeah, I'm doing it. I'm going to win. I'm going to make a lot of freaking money. Like, that's the mindset, right? And I go on, and in my humble opinion, I believe I crushed it. But what really helped a lot was that Phil Green actually watched that competition, right? So he watched the competition. This is in, like, I want to say March of 2020. I joined Collective Genius in April of 2020, meet Phil Green in May, right? And he's like, hey, you're the one that did close Olympics. I want you to coach my team. And like after that, it just took off like wildfire inside of Collective Genius. But like, if I didn't do the closest Olympics and put myself out there, I might not have knocked it out of the park from day one.
So for those who don't know, there's a mastermind. It's one of the elite, if not the most elite mastermind in the REI space. And you have to do a certain amount of volumes. They got different entry tiers, but you have to be a producer to kind of get into the circle. And this gentleman that he's talking about, Phil Green, is like the North Star of the REI world. He's one of our clients out in California, and he's like the elite CEO. Honestly, I put him on a pedestal really solo.
Yeah, he's the alpha of the alphas.
Exactly. And you wouldn't know when you see him, but when he speaks, it is there. He is a lion. He is a lion for sure. But it speaks a lot to that mastermind and that community and how quick it was, because Steve, as a guy who came into the space, I think in like end of 20-ish or somewhere in 20, the way your presence was already in this vertical until this exact moment in this conversation today, dude, I would have thought you was running this place for 8 years on. Like I must have just came in right after you said, I'm here. But the authenticity in your words and the way you articulate is it's different than everybody else's. And so what I think is a good match, and I was trying to figure out how I would say this without offending the industry. This industry, so I'm going to try it. I'm practicing this one in my head, Steve. Why I think you're such a good fit. This is not a scumbag cutthroat industry. There's a lot of sales industry that is filled with just excuse my language, but degenerates, really bad people. For the most part, the overwhelming part, this industry is actually filled with really good people. They're like local mom and pop investors. They have worked hard their whole lives. They have capital. They're trying to produce their own deals. It's a local wholesaler who's a good guy. And you are a version of them. You're like a really good dude. And you're not some bad person. You're not trying to teach them how to screw somebody out of their house. You're trying to teach them how to help somebody out of their situation and exchange value for equity. And I think that right there is why you articulate and communicate so well into this industry, because people don't want to do a good thing a bad way in their heart of hearts. And you're showing people how to do a good thing in a good way, in an articulate way from an authoritative standpoint. So that's why I think you fit so well in this industry for the way your sales process is.
Oh, thank you. That's very kind of you. And yeah, it's, we're very passionate about that. We genuinely want to help people, like it's so easy to go and like take advantage of somebody. It's so easy, right? But you can make a lot of money being ethical and honorable. Yeah. So why would you do that? And another thing too, you mentioned the mom and pop. I think the big thing, there are a lot of bad actors, but they weed themselves out because people don't realize how small the real estate investor community is. Yeah. It's not difficult to get blacklisted pretty fast, screwing somebody over.
Yeah. But even with that being said, Steve, it's also a buddy industry, at least on the guru side. So does your wife, who's so close to you, does she pay attention to the industry ever?
Yes, she actually does to some degree because she works at Left Main for Stephanie Betters.
Oh, nice. Okay. So she gets to see a little bit how the sausage is made. Does she ever just like poke you in the ribs and be like, I know that guy's foolish. Like, so you guys see it up close and personal, because there is a lot of people who put spotlights on themselves in this space, and not anybody specific. I'm just talking my observations.
Yeah. She doesn't pay attention to the social media side. So no, not that.
So she's protected. She's protected from her feed and being like, oh, that's that guy I just helped set up a CRM with 300 leads, and that's all he's had for the past year. And he's talking about he just closed 400 deals.
Yeah, no, she doesn't have that. But what's really good is that, we have, because of the tight community, we can check like, hey, like this is what this person said. Like, does that add up? Yeah. Like, no, that doesn't add up. Right. Yeah. Or like, it's funny because he was asking me for money not too long ago.
Oh, yeah, I don't know. Yeah, exactly. Well, dude, I saw this industry go from like wholesaling to crypto to drop shipping to NFTs. Oh, yeah. And I say this industry, but I saw like influencers bounce around and change products and then all of a sudden circle back after drop shipping went down and then go into novations or creative and who knows what's next month. And that to me is really shocking, because there's, I guess, enough of a churn of entry-level people that you can snipe off of the bottom and continually churn for some level of time. Most of them have, like you said, weeded themselves out. But you've been in it longer, and you're in the Mecca in Arizona. Yeah. So I know you've seen some things.
Oh, yeah. We've seen some things. We laugh about some things, right? Offline. Yeah, it's great. Yeah.
If you, but do you struggle sometimes with being like, okay, well, this voice just popped up and saying things that aren't true, right? Or they're talking about their success from a time era where the market was completely different. I think that to me is a big thing, is like people will talk about a market, 7 years ago or 7 months ago or whatever it may be. And that era is different. And so those sales tactics are different. And so do you struggle sometimes, at least internally, with your own self-talk, like, all right, well, I know the truth and I can't really go out there and call him out because I don't want to be a pariah.
I don't say much. I just disassociate, right? So like, Darren Hardy, he's someone I've got a lot of mentorship from. And he talks about there are people that you want to see every day. There are people that you want to see once a month. There are people you want to see once a quarter. There are people you want to see once a year. And there are people you don't ever want to see, right?
That's a great way of putting it. Wow. So true.
Yeah. And there are a lot of people that I was like, oh, knowing what I know, they fit in this bucket. You know, one of the things I've said, because people ask me to like collaborate with them, this and that. And I just tell them, I got too much going on. That's my nice way of saying it. Right. Yeah. But it's like, you want to keep your jersey clean. So you want to disassociate yourself with that person. And we've actually had some bad actors on our podcast that they had the stats, they had the ability to prove what they said was true, but they made some really bad decisions and they hurt some people. So I just take them off the podcast, right?
Smart.
Because I don't want to be associated with you. So
we kind of skipped over that in your journey. I can't tell you how important I think that your podcast is to this industry. And your interviewing capabilities. I don't think that when I was on your podcast, I don't think it's still to this date, I've had somebody who made me feel as comfortable as you did in your presence. And with the questions your team and yourself had put together, I don't, once I started my own little one, then I realized, oh, this is really hard. Like this is like, it's not like physically hard, but it's being in your presence. I said, oh, that's the gold standard. That's what I'm going to go to. Were you always good right out of the gates? It's like, if I go back and watch podcast number 1, are you flowing as good as you are as last month?
Podcast number 1 was not so good. Podcast number 2, I think was pretty good. And I think it was pretty good starting from podcast 2. But podcast number 1 was not so good. But, you know, it is what it is. What I've had some people ask me, like, how did you get good at running a podcast? And what I told them is like, well, I was doing this before the cameras were on because I was always taking people that I respected or looked up to lunch. And I would come prepared with questions so I didn't waste their time. So I would show up, right? Hey, here's what I'm looking at. Here's what I'm considering, right? It wasn't like, hey, Scott, I'm stuck in my business. Can you help me out? It's like, hey, Scott, here's some things I'm looking at. I'm not sure what is the right step. Should I do A, B, or C with the information I presented to you today? And you would give me guidance because I did the work beforehand. You didn't have to invent an idea. You just told me A, B, or C based off your body of experience. And so when I started the podcast, I was already doing that for over a decade, just taking people out to lunch.
Boy, I love that. And then too, you think about the side benefit that you probably didn't realize, or maybe you did, maybe you're that good of a forecaster, but the relationships that you've built because of that and the insights that you get, because who else gets to ask people of such high aptitude in the REI space, the questions that you want to ask about your own REI space or your own coaching, like what a hack. You literally you get to extract from people's brains the questions that you want right there in that time and date. So like kudos to you, bro.
So prior to podcasting, that was a blogging tactic, right? Hey, Scott, I'm writing a blog about the best lead providers in the country. Would you be okay if I interview for my blog, right? I'll be sure to link to Lab and Sue in my blog, right? Everybody would answer that. So it's been a hack around forever. But the other thing too was, I was looking at 50 Cent, right? The rapper, great guy. When I started the podcast, I was like, I need to be like 50 Cent, but nice, right? A podcast where I'm going to get every influencer on the podcast to blow it up as quickly as possible, right? So we had Carlos Reyes, Sal Shakir, Alex Sainz, Jalen White, Rafael Vargas, you know, but we had Maxwell. Right, we had every influencer so that it will blow up the podcast, and it did. It worked.
I love that, bro. Dude, it's very thoughtful. So the podcasting, the coaching business. Where is the coaching business as it sits today? Where do people? I have a really strategic question I want to ask you, but where do they find the coaching business at today? Is that Close More Sales?
So closemoresales.com is the top of the funnel. And you guys can check it out, but I'm giving something away, so you don't have to go there. I'm giving something away. You'll find out some stuff there. But right now, people find me in one of two ways. One is masterminds, or one of three ways. One is masterminds, one is through social media. And the third one is, like I said, I became the CMO of our company. We're doing all the paid marketing, right? So there's the third way. But organic is this. And then I am strategically now going to multiple masterminds to be the sales guy.
Yeah.
Right. So that's going to be another way.
From the product side, this is the question I've been dying to ask you. Knowing what you know now, what would you do different? Not like the marketing side, but the actual deliverable that you've seen impact and or miss in certain parts. Like, what would you do differently in your coaching business if you could start it all over again to provide even more value than the tremendous impact you've made?
What would I do differently? I don't know, because I can tell you the changes I made from when I started it. So when I first started, it was just sales, right? It was just sales, training, and then I'll answer some questions, right, for an hour. Like that's what we were doing when we first started. Now we have an hour of sales principles and then clarifying questions on those sales principles for an hour.
Nice.
And then that's on Tuesdays, and on Wednesdays, we just go straight objection handling. Just bring your objections. And it's not always just objections. It could be a mindset question. It could be a belief system. It could be like, hey, I always get stuck when I'm trying to do this part of the sales process. Or it could be just a real estate transaction. Because again, I've been buying houses since 2005, right? So like I do from time to time, it's like, oh yeah, just go do this. And then this clears that title issue. So like anything that stops them from making money, we talk about that on that call. And then on Thursdays, every other Thursday, we alternate. We do lead manager calls and dispo manager calls, right? So I added the objection handling call, and I added the dispo and lead manager call, and then we just added a sales manager call. So those are things that we've added. So I guess those are the changes I've made from when we started.
Sounds like a lot more access, a lot more content nowadays too, right? I mean, you're talking about multiple times a month that they're getting access to you in the organization.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, access to
Damn.
me, because I'm the one that's running all those. Because I actually enjoy teaching. I actually wanted to be a school teacher at one point, but I can't afford it. So,
Well, dude, it's how you make it. It's crazy. It's crazy. That's why you have to have the heart for that, because it doesn't pay. But what you're doing is exactly that. Again, this is the gospel. When I first saw you, I wasn't attracted to your content. I was like, in my head, I was like, my sales guys scream and yell and they hit sticks and, like it's Tony Robbins era. At least that's where I was stuck in it. But the moment I actually paused and listened, I was like, oh God, this guy knows exactly the concepts. There's just no sugarcoating it. The raw is there. And so I encourage anybody. I'm very unique in this situation where I've worked with hundreds of people nationwide. My most successful affiliates, sales teams out there, when they say that they either currently work or have people that have gone through training or currently in training with Steve Trang, I'm like, shoo, like we're going to rock it. These people understand sales concepts. They understand objection handling. They understand how to position an offer. They understand how to nurture a lead post offer to still be able to bring that in. And so I know that you're one of the best, if not the single best current educator out there for sales in the REI space. And what the best part is, guys and gals, is if you're in the REI space and you pivot, these sales principles are evergreen. He literally could be selling anything. This could be solar. This could be timeshare. This could be literally anything out there. It just so happens that he's now showing you some of the rough edges that are real estate based, but the principles are forever.
Absolutely. I mean, the other thing too is like the things I've said is the thing I appreciate the most about getting good at sales is that it's made me a better father and it's made me a better husband.
Wow.
Right.
Tell me more.
So, well, like we know we don't like to ask why questions because it leads to defensiveness, right? So like, why didn't you go with that realtor? It's like, well, that's none of your goddamn business, right? And so with my kids, when they're crying, I don't ask them, hey, why are you crying? Because then this defensive is not safe. So I just ask them, hey, how come you're crying? And now it provides safety for them to talk about how come they're crying, right? Or, you want to start a fight with your wife. She tells you she's had a really rough day. Oh, why was it a rough day? Now you're getting all like, I don't have to defend why it's a bad day. Like she doesn't psychologically know why she's angry with you, but you're going to get it, right?
Yes.
So he's like, oh, what happened today? What made it a bad day? And now she can just share and get it off her chest, right? And then the other thing too is as husbands or boyfriends, like we screw ourselves by trying to fix their problems.
Yeah.
But in sales, we don't fix problems. In sales, we just talk about what's going on. Oh man, like if we can take care of that, like what would happen next? We never fix problems. So you learn the discipline to not fix problems when you're running a sales appointment. Use that experience at home with your wife or girlfriend.
This whole time I'm thinking, I'm like, man, I hope my wife doesn't listen to this because she's going to be like, oh, that's how you use your powers for good? Because all you keep on doing is boxing me into where I don't have a rebuttal anymore and you win every argument. And that's not the way. It can go the other way. And I actually had to lay off of it because after a couple of years of just dating and whatever, she'd be like, you're always right all the time. Because you can always talk your way into that situation where like we've closed this door, closed this window, now we're just left with Scott being right. But you obviously attack this much better. And that's probably why, you're not afraid if your wife sees this podcast.
No, she knows. She's watched me do a presentation. She's familiar with it. As a matter of fact, it's unsolicited, but I was like, hey, that conversation you just had with our daughter, you could have said it this way.
Yeah.
And she went again as defensive. She's like, she resisted, of course. But then it's like, okay, we'll try that.
I want to talk to you real quick about AI. I know it sounds so generic. My opinion has been changing so rapidly in the past 6 months. Steve, I'm just curious, how do you see if you were to say, hey, man, this is how I think it's going to affect the REI space, not necessarily the coaching space, but the REI space over the next, 6 months to a year? And if you have any fear-based mindset or what are your concerns are with it as well, too?
Yeah, completely fearful. I mean, I think we're not going to be here in 5 years, but that's live life, man.
Yes.
Enjoy it. So I think there's that. But I think also there's applications of it. And it can't quite get tonality today, right? But it can break down calls. Something that we're playing with right now is using Fathom for calls, right? we're trying to figure out how we can take, because we use high level. We haven't figured it out yet. We're trying to figure out how to take the call from high level, plug in AI, and have AI come back and give us the notes in a CRM. We're not there yet.
Yeah.
But for my coaching program, right? Every call I do, we got Fathom in there. And then I forward the call to my VA and he puts it back into when we upload the call, and it has like all the notes, thorough, right? But as far as sales, I don't think it can necessarily help a high caliber salesperson per se, but it could definitely help a newer salesperson. Here's what to say next, right? Here's what they're saying. Here's what it means. I think for that, yes, but on a high caliber sales where we're like, he knows like the basics, he knows the fundamentals, but like, hey, you gotta reframe this conversation from this perspective to that perspective, where it requires imagination and thinking outside the box. AI can't help you there, but AI can help. It can help a cold caller. It can help a lead manager, and it can help your basic acquisition manager.
You know, the thing that I'm looking for the most help on is the comping. Mm-hmm. You know, if I could better analyze, and so I own every single address record of the entire United States. And if I could better run that AI into it to really help me delineate my offers and exactly who I'm calling inside. So that's the part I'm excited for. And I also think, though, it's going to be to the guys and gals who have the capital to really go. It's like the trading firms that do those millisecond trades on Wall Street. Like they're so far ahead of the average person. That's what AI is going to be like on the offer level for the REI space. So I'm really excited to see the impact that has and who the big guys are who'll have that.
I think you're right on that. I think the comping, it could be probably instantaneous within the next year and a half.
Yeah.
Right? Because it's just machine learning. It's not, you don't even need AI. That's just machine learning.
Exactly. So I'm excited to see it come because it's one of the hardest parts. I got the sales part down now. I just got to make sure I'm making the right damn offer and close it for the right darn price. So
exactly.
Dude, I am super thankful that you took time out of your busy schedule. I know that by the time that we're live now, but by the time this gets published, you have a big event this weekend, and then you got another one coming up though in a little bit. So for the people that we're live with who will see this today, what do you got going on this weekend? And then what do you got coming up?
Yeah, so we're doing something with Sharon Lecter. She's one of the co-authors of Rich Dad Poor Dad. Right, so we're doing an event tomorrow in Phoenix. So if you guys have time, you can just go to johnburley.com, JOHNBURLEY.com, I believe. We have our live event coming up September 12th, September 13th. That's 2 full days inside my office where we're going to go over a sales process from beginning to end. I know 2 days feels like a long time. When we started, it was only an hour, and then it was half a day, and then it was a day, then it was a day and a half. It's now 2 days, and we still don't get through all of it. So it's 2 full days of understanding our sales process. And we have guys that are killers that come, and they still get something from it because it's something different when you show up live and you're fully present. And then for everyone that's listening, you know, we do have something to give away. So, you know, if you went to closemoresales.com right now and you could buy a book there, right? But we're giving it for free. So we have our Active Listening 2.0 book. We have our top 5 objection handlers, top 5 objections, how to handle them, our perfect appointment script. We have the call listening tool. So a review sheet. So, you know, someone asked me, Andre Carvalho, which I believe is a client of yours.
Yes, a very successful client of mine.
Yeah. So he was like, hey, Steve, like, what are you listening for on these calls? Like, that's a great point. Let me write that down. It's 3 pages. 3 pages of everything I'm listening to on every single call, right? And from that, you can figure out what you're doing well and what you're not doing well and how you can fix it. And then we have 2 hours of me breaking down our communication process. And then the last thing is, if you guys want someone to review your script, Ian Ross on my team is doing a complimentary review. So text the word script, SCRIPT, to the phone number 33777, script 33777. And if you want to come to our event, again, it's closemoresales.com/real estate sales. I believe that's the URL.
Man, I kind of look at life as just one of those things. It's a multitude of butterfly effects. And, you know, I started my sales career because of just some one random thing. And then you had this one mentor, and then I had this one book, and everything unloads and changes. And so for the guys and gals that are hearing our voices, that are watching this, like closemoresales.com, it's part of that butterfly effect, that journey where you're able to do one small thing and have the potentiality to really make a ripple in this world, in your own financial situation, and how your self-confidence is when you present yourself. And maybe it's just about giving you confidence to take that step and become that REI investor, right? To become that person who feels confident when they talk to a seller. Because if you feel like me and Steve feel, which is we can have everything that we want in our life, we'll just help enough people get what they want out of life. Got to have the tools to help these people. And I say it with conviction. I say it from the bottom of my heart. This guy that's on this screen with me is one of the best, if not the absolute best in the industry for teaching you how to speak with a seller, to find their pain points and offer them a solution that will allow you to not only build some financial wealth in your life, but also be able to help them out of a situation that they very likely couldn't have gotten help with without you being present. So closemoresales.com. Go to follow Steve Trang on IG, Facebook. He's going to be at the best masterminds out there. Is there any other place they need to look for you for, Steve Trang?
So Instagram, steve.trang, or if you want to listen to the podcast, it's Disruptors on iTunes, Spotify, and YouTube.
Cool. And find our old podcast out there. It was a doozy, dude. I enjoyed it. I laughed my ass off. And I went back and listened to it for scripting purposes not too long ago. I said, oh, man, I was saying some spicy things I don't know if I would say today. I was trying to be nicer. Anyways, brother, it's a pleasure to have you out here, dude. I appreciate you taking your time out of your hectic schedule for us here at the Leads to Deals podcast. Guys, if you found value in this podcast, I want you to subscribe. I want you to like, share. And then, Steve, dude, I can't wait to see you at the next event.
See you soon.
All right, bye.